What's up, everybody? So I'm going to do yet another video, another astrology video. This time we are going to talk about Saturn. I apologize for the lighting. It's night. I wasn't able to get to this earlier today. So here we are. Anyway, Saturn historically was like a very feared planet. And Saturn has, unfortunately, a really shitty reputation. But see, I actually like Saturn. I mean, Saturn can make your life exhausting, but Saturn is the great materializer. I know people who understand astrology tend to yield their preferences towards Jupiter as being some sort of Santa Claus that just gives you abundance and gifts. But like, I don't know that that's really the case. See, Jupiter just expands things, but Saturn makes things a reality. In fact, that's what Saturn is synonymous with, is like harsh reality. And Saturn is Capricorn, the goat. When we look at the chart, we're looking at 10th house, the highest point of the chart, just like in Capricorn being represented by the goat. What does a goat do? It scales the mountain. It gets to the highest point of a mountain, and it will do it sideways if it needs to. Goats have no problem climbing over obstacles to get to where they want to go. So, Saturn is a really great energy to work with if you're trying to materialize or manifest something in your life. Some key words for Saturn would be like authority, teacher, lord of karma, great taskmaster, teacher, I guess. It's this kind of maturity. It's older, wiser. And Saturn is structure. Saturn is the energy that puts pressure on things to see if it's solid. And so when Saturn is in a spot if it's transiting your chart, it's going to put pressure on that area. It's kind of like think of the rooms of a home, and like Saturn is making its way around your home. When it gets to each room, it's like, okay, it's time to tidy up this room. So when Saturn visits a house in your chart, that's basically what's happening. Is it's saying, okay, now it's time to bring strength, in unyielding structure to this area of your life. And it will put pressure on things to reveal what is weak so that it can be fixed and made better. So Saturn in the 4th house might actually literally show up as like a leak in your sink, the garage door not opening, right? Because the 4th house is the physical home. It will show where there needs to be repair amongst family members, and might also tie into real estate. Saturn, for example, interestingly enough, Saturn in the 5th house, because the 5th house is the house of like fun and new beginnings and where relationships might just find that spark. Saturn, being so serious, can bring in a serious relationship in the 5th house, ironically, and kind of take away that lightheartedness, right? So things get more serious where Saturn goes. And I don't know. See, I guess because my South Node is in Capricorn and I just have like apparently a history of understanding Saturnian behavior, I personally don't mind that effort. I'm not afraid of hard work. I don't love it, but I'm not afraid of it either. And and that's the thing about Saturn, is Saturn is going to make you work hard. The way I describe it is when it hits a point on the chart, like especially a personal point, is it's going to demand your attention in that area. And you think, okay, I got this, I can handle this, I'll deal with it. And then you go about it the way that you've always gone about it, and all of a sudden that way's not working. So Saturn not only says this needs to be remedied or this needs to be fixed, but then like by transit, it kind of ties your hands and forces you to do it in a new way. So it's like you have to think outside the box, or like resources that were normally available, now they aren't, or you have to push harder than you normally would, or like Saturn on the moon, for example, can bring up feelings of isolation, where you would normally find security in your life, you're going to feel a little stranded and alone. So you have to work extra hard to develop a sense of like security, usually within, during like a Saturn moon transit. And so with that, if you're willing to do the work, you will be rewarded. Now, a lot of times people refer to Saturn as like restrictions and blockages. And, I know that exists and that's there as a potentiality, because obviously, depending on our level of consciousness, we're either always dealing with lower octave behavior and situations, or higher octave opportunities, right? And so Saturn is, like I said, it's going to restrict your capacity to do things in a normal way, but it will still ask you to do them. Now, if you resist, things get worse, right? If you have a leak in your house and you don't tend to it, you're going to have mold. It could flood, like things will get worse, right? So Saturn, isn't like just going to forget about it because you don't bring attention to it. It'll just get worse, right? And this is why I think like historically Saturn was feared. But Saturn being the 8 of the Lord of Karma, it's like whatever energy you're putting into it, you will get out of it. And so Saturn is really great at rewarding effort. Like, because what's at the top of that mountain, right? Like once you get there, it's so worth the climb. And so, yes, there are things like blockages and restrictions, and this can be in the natal chart as well. But the thing is, that's not there as like a permanent inhibitor. Like if you have Saturn in your 4th house, like as do I do, it just kind of meant that there were some, again, restrictions, blockages, somberness, seriousness, maybe cold energy, because Saturn is certainly not warm and fuzzy. So there's an element of like having to work around things. And yes, where Saturn sits in the natal chart, we can look to things like the father, and we can look to things like karma. Ironically, I didn't have any issues with my dad. They were all with my mother. So the fact that Saturn showed up in my natal chart in the 4th, just to me says that it's not always so specific. It's just that the 10th house is synonymous with father, which is Saturn's domain, Capricorn's home, right? It's all things unite there. But but Saturn like also brings delays. So if there's Saturn sitting, say, on the cusp of your 7th house, or you have Capricorn on the cusp of your 7th house, you might not settle down until you're much older, right? If you have Saturn in the 5th, you might be a little bit older when you have children. It's not that these things aren't available to us. It's just that we have to work harder, and there's some delay around it. However, again, because of that reward that comes with it, you're usually better equipped to handle what comes your way, and you appreciate it more when it does. I've seen a lot of like Saturn 1st house stuff where, again, synonymous with Capricorn. So this can like go two ways. Like sometimes these people come across as just really having their shit together, right? That persona of like, I am mature, I have a life that everyone thinks is so perfect because it just looks so well built, whatever, right? Like you give off an air of having your shit together with Saturn on that 1st house cusp, or in the 1st house. The other thing that tends to happen a lot with like Saturn in the 1st is you have physical limitations. So a lot of times these people are born with things like degenerative issues or scoliosis or weird birthmarks or something. So there's a restriction or blockage around how they appear, how their body functions. That's pretty common as well. And so Saturn in the natal chart is going to reveal an issue that we get to revisit over and over again, because the whole 7-year cycle is this Saturn cycle. And so every 7 years, Saturn is going to conjunct, oppose, or square itself. And we get to then go, okay, what did we do these last 7 years? Especially in regards to its natal position, what have we learned? What have we taken with us? What have we built? What have we let go of? And so this is a constant maturing that happens as a result of Saturn's influence in the chart. And in astrology, you're not even considered an adult until you're 29, because that's when you have your first Saturn return. So it's when Saturn makes a complete visit around the entire zodiac that finally, and it's come home, and we go, okay, you've done a full wheel here, and now you're an adult. Like, I know I try to keep things in like as dummy terms as I can, but like that's how you are defined as having grown up, is once you've had that conjunction again and you've completed those first 3 or 4 cycles, right? So anyway, yeah, I think Saturn is really a very misunderstood planet a lot of the time. Again, it brings a serious nature to where it is in the natal chart. It can bring stability to that area of your life. It can bring obstacles and blockages, but usually, if worked correctly, brings stability and structure. So I never want someone to look at Saturn as just like all bad, because none of these planets are like all bad or all good. They all have a helpful side and a challenging side to them. And so it's really just about your level of consciousness when dealing with the planet, either natally or in transit. So I think the hardest house for me was Saturn in the 5th, because it really just made, I just didn't enjoy things as much. It was weird. I had a serious relationship during that time, and I just didn't enjoy things. It really brought a somberness. Things drastically lightened up once it went into the 6th house for me. And the 6th house in Saturn is definitely more of a better fit than the 5th. Yeah, and some of the harder transits, I would say, by point might be the moon. That's a sensitive one. Maybe Venus. Like, these guys don't talk well with each other. So when Saturn brings attention to your sense of security or your values and what you find beautiful and lovely in life, it can feel like some sharp edges are hitting it. But for the most part, Saturn is really a great planet to have an aspect at any given time. And I also want to point out that, like, I just have had Saturn in my 8th house for the last 2 years. And a lot of astrologers will actually say that this is like a horrible time. And it's not a horrible time. It's a lot of work. I found Saturn in all of these houses. 7th was a lot of work. 7th, when Saturn hit my 7th house cusp, I went into litigation with a former business partner for 2.5 years. When Saturn went into the 8th, we closed that settlement out. And, it's the 8th house is known as the house of like losses, but it's the house of gains too. So I definitely went through like probably 10 different situations in the last 2 years where contractually, 8th house, something was off And unfortunately, I had to kind of fight to get my money back on certain things, like a car rental in Costa Rica. I finally got my money back from that. They tried to charge me $2,100 for insurance, not even for the car, just the insurance, right? So there were certain situations where I felt like I was being swindled and I had to fight. So there was a lot of energy that went out with Saturn in the eighth. But ultimately, every single one of these situations, I got restitution. So, I would never ever say that, like, oh God, Saturn's headed for your eighth, you're just going to lose a lot of money. That's so irresponsible to say that to someone, because everything that we experience in astrology is based on our level of consciousness. Point blank, like plain and simple. So was I at the mercy of a lot of potential losses? Yes. Did I end up losing out? No. I was able to have my situations remedied ultimately because I was not willing to give up or give in. Saturn made me work my ass off, but ultimately things were restored the way they should have been. And, with Venus there, I had to fight for my value. Like you're not going to take advantage of me. So that was a big theme. So again, the thing with Saturn is it's going to make you work for it, but you will be rewarded. It's Saturn is the best planet if you're trying to build something amazing. It is the best planet to work with if you want to build an empire or a strong marriage or a healthy business or whatever it is that you're trying to create. Saturn is a fabulous energy to work with. I would never knock it. And I would look for it. I'd be like, where is Saturn in my chart right now? And how can I use it to my advantage? And not see it as like this great asshole in the sky trying to make your life miserable. So anyway, that is the long and the short when it comes to Saturn. I hope you enjoyed this video. As usual, feel free to contact me if you would like me to look at your personal horoscope, which I love doing. I enjoy doing natal charts, transits, as well as synastry charts. So let me know. And otherwise, I will see you guys next time. Bye.